All right, welcome again. Always excited to be participating in the sharing of the Word with you. We are in a short but important series called Why Church, a study of how God cares for His people. We started it last week. The idea of this series is to engage maybe the questions of our culture. You know, why go to the trouble of being part of a church? We've seen a great de-churching happen over the last 20 years, and with things like a pandemic and some of the difficulties that people have experienced in church hurt and things like that. Many are recognizing, you know, it's easier just to stay at home, maybe to stream an online sermon or to go to church online rather than putting on my coat, getting out the door and coming to church. And so we want to engage that question, why church? And last week we looked at the first answer to why church by remembering that we are sheep. We are sheep, and as sheep we need help from our tendency to stray. It reminds me, as we think about last week, this book, the words that we're reading come from the Apostle Peter in his first letter. And I think as we go through these verses, Peter's story lays behind it. I think Peter is a man who was formed by his experiences to be an apostle, to reach people in a very difficult time. We know Peter's story. He was a sheep when he was a disciple of Jesus, and he was a sheep that strayed. He was a sheep that got sifted like wheat on the night that our Savior was betrayed. I think we're one slide behind. He got sifted like wheat. He was bold and courageous and thought, not me. I will not be one of those weakling disciples, one of those straying sheep. I will die with you, Jesus, if that's what it comes to. And yet we find only hours after his strong pronouncement of vigor and strength that a young maid calls out to him, "Aren't you one of those followers of Jesus?" And he crumbles and cowers and says, "Not me." And he hurls curses upon himself. 3 times he denies that he is with Jesus. And he falls. He strays. He goes into the far country. He denies the Lord. This is Peter's story of being a straying sheep. But he is also one who knows profoundly how great is our shepherd who seeks after straying sheep. And so in John chapter 21, we have this exciting story where Jesus calls out for Peter specifically and brings him back into the fold. Jesus, even though he was denied by Peter 3 times, had grace, had forgiveness, had love that was able to cover the multitude of Peter's straying and welcomed him back into the flock. Before we go any further, dwell upon the story of Peter, because as each and every one of us are sheep prone to straying, we are also people prone to say, "I have strayed too far. I have strayed beyond the reach. I have strayed outside of forgiveness, outside of redemption, outside of grace." Peter is the first apostle so that you can know there is no sin too great. There is no fall too far. There is no error too extreme that our shepherd will not come for you and bring you home. Simply cry, "I have gone astray. I want to be brought home." And the good shepherd will carry you all the way back. But that's only half of the story. We saw from last week that the church is the flock of God that we have been restored to. That Jesus brings us back to the flock. And so the flock is the church. It's the local church. It's where we experience the fact that we have been brought from straying back to his home. And it is a great gift. The being part of the church is a blood-bought gift of the gospel. Now, the question that pushes us forward this morning is, how do we experience the care and protection of Christ through the church today? And again, I think Peter writes this 5th chapter with the words of Christ at his restoration in his mind. When Peter was being restored on that beach after Jesus' resurrection, we read these words in John 21. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." He said to him, "Feed my lambs." He said to him a second time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." He said to him, "Tend my sheep." He said to him the third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep." You see, Peter was driven astray. Peter was restored. And then Peter was commissioned. He was told by the risen Lord, "I need shepherds to tend my sheep." And so here Peter is recognizing the second answer, why church? And that is, we need shepherds. Jesus made sure that Peter was left with this indelible commission, shepherd the flock. And so 1 Peter is a letter written by Peter as he is in the end of his ministry. And as he is dealing with a church in a very hostile, strange, and unwelcoming land where his young flock are called strangers and exiles, he comes to the last few thoughts that he wants to impart to this young church. And he turns his mind to what they need, the same thing Jesus said the flock would need, and that is shepherds. So Christ here, 1 Peter 5 is telling us, Christ gives his church shepherds. This week then, we are going to spend our duration of the message looking at God's design for the church to protect and bless his sheep. And so we're going to talk about this important role of shepherds. Now, as we come into a conversation about the church's role of providing oversight and leadership, it would not be surprising to me if that topic stirs up some worry or some pain. It could be very well triggering to some who have gone through abuse, who have experienced hurt from leaders of the church exercising more authority than is their due or using their office for their advantage. And it is a sad state that the church in America has experienced a great deal of church hurt. Lifeway published a survey just this week describing the overall trust that the American public has for clergy. And that number is falling. I guess we don't have that slide in there. It was supposed to be. I think maybe we didn't. Oh, never mind. It has fallen precipitously. In 2019, it was about 40%. And today, it is around 25%. This week, now we can go back to that picture. This week, if you're hip, you know about Drewski. Who knows about Drewski? I don't want to show who's hip and who's not. Some people are, mostly young people. Drewski is this kind of cultural comedian who released this skit skewering megachurch culture, showing how pastors are dressing flamboyantly, speaking insane things from their pulpit, demanding more and more money, and really taking advantage and damaging the flock of God. The parody is so close to the reality. We live in a time with lots of false pastors and fraudulent leaders of the church. And so to bring up a conversation about church leadership, I recognize you may be coming from a place where that's hard to stomach. So as we look at 1 Peter 5, I want us all to recognize that a healthy church is the responsibility of the whole flock. What we are talking about today is not about a subset or a group of people, but it is about all of us. We all have a part. And so I want to set a vision in front of us as Renew. If we all do our part, we will all be cared for, protected, and blessed as a church. And so today I want us to go through this passage in 1 Peter 5 to see what is our part in maintaining a healthy church. Some parts may relate to you only indirectly, but at least two parts are going to relate to you very closely. So please, as we seek to be a healthy church, as we seek to be a church that heeds those sacred words to Peter, feed my sheep, let us see what our part is in maintaining a healthy church. The first thing we see is that elders do their part by being shepherds. Elders do their part by being shepherds. So Peter starts chapter 5 by saying, "So I exhort the elders among you." Now, the context of 1 Peter is that Peter is writing to the church in the 6th decade of the 1st century. This is a time where the church has spread out broadly across the Roman Empire, but also the church has begun to become a target of persecution, both from the Jewish community, but also has become recognized by Roman authorities as a problem. In the middle of the 60s, Emperor Nero famously used Christians as the fall guy for the burning of Rome. And so large cultural and even state-sponsored persecution is falling upon the church. The idea of confessing Jesus as Lord in a world that is commanded to confess Caesar and Caesar only is Lord is a fragile, dangerous community. And so Peter knows his time of ministry, his time of apostleship is coming close to an end. And he knows that the flock, that the church is going to need help as the clouds are very dark. And that is why he addresses this group in the 5th chapter that he calls elders. In the Greek, it is the word presbyteros, which is where the Presbyterian denomination gets their name. It is the word for elders. Now, when we hear the word elders, there are lots of ideas that kind of come up about what elders are. And when Peter talks about elders, I want you to know that he is not talking about a board of directors. He is not talking about those successful business people getting their opportunity to make the church fly right. When he talks about elders, he is also not talking about a group of talented and skilled people. He's not saying, well, because you have been so successful in the world, you are clearly an elder. That's not who he's talking about when he talks about elders. When he says the word elders, he is also not saying the exclusive leaders of the church. He is not saying that only elders are leaders. There are many leaders that Peter has in mind. He is only speaking to a specific group when he speaks of elders. And then finally, and maybe most importantly, when he says elders, he is not meaning just the old people. That is not what he is describing by the word elders. He is instead describing a particular group of people that Paul also describes in his letter, 1 Timothy chapter 3. So I want to read what Paul describes an elder as. It says, an overseer must be above reproach, the husband of one wife, sober-minded, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not a drunkard, not violent but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. He must manage his own household well with all dignity, keeping his children submissive. For if someone does not know how to manage his own household, how will he care for God's church? He must not be a recent convert, or he may become puffed up with conceit and fall into the condemnation of the devil. Moreover, he must be well thought of by outsiders, so that he may not fall into disgrace, into the snare of the devil. Notice as we look at those words in 1 Timothy that an elder is someone marked more by their character than by their abilities. In fact, there's only one ability mentioned, the ability to teach. But the vast majority of what makes an elder are the qualities of their character. And so elders, in Peter's mind and Paul's mind, are mature, proven, unashamed Christ followers. That's what an elder is. Now, I do think Paul gives a good kind of analogy for what an elder is if we go back to his words in verses 4 and 5, where he says he must manage his own household well with all dignity, keeping his children submissive. For if someone does not know how to manage his own household, how will he care for God's church? Paul is saying the proving ground, the testing ground of an elder is his own home. And so there is a kind of a way to understand elders as a fatherly role. As Paul also describes it in 1 Corinthians 4:14, he says this, I do not write these things to make you ashamed, but to admonish you as my beloved children. For though you have countless guides in Christ, you do not have many fathers. For I became your father in Christ Jesus through the gospel. I urge you then, be imitators of me. What Paul wants us to grasp is that the spirit of an elder is very much like the spirit of a father. I remember when I became a dad, everything changed. I was, honestly, the hours before my baby was born, I was searching on the internet for a really killer stereo. Like, I need a better stereo. Like, the thing that is lacking in my life is 100 watts per channel stereo. Later that day, Becky delivers our first child, and I heard that baby's cry. That cry defined me. Suddenly, I was a dad. In a flash, in less time than it takes to click your fingers, I went from a person who was thinking about stereos to suddenly realizing my life is entirely given over to the protection, the well-being, and the raising up of this new human being. To the extent that my own harm was secondary. You see, that is what is being called for in the elder. An elder is one who gives his life to raising others up in the gospel. And so Peter addresses this group of people, and he gives an imperative, he gives a command. He says to these elders, shepherd the flock of God that is among you, exercising oversight, not under compulsion, but willingly, as God would have you, not for shameful gain, but eagerly, not domineering over those in your charge, but being examples to the flock. As Peter is preparing to leave this flock in the stewardship of this class of elders, he really breaks down their responsibility with three aspects. The first aspect of their eldering responsibility, of their being a shepherd, is to lead. He says they are to shepherd the flock that is among you. Think back to Psalm 23. What does the shepherd do? He leads the flock to still waters and green pastures. The leadership of a shepherd is to bring his flock to safe and flourishing places. The second responsibility is that they are there to protect. He says, exercising oversight. That means he is supposed to have his head up above, looking and seeing, are there any dangers? Are there any threats for my flock? Reminds us in the 23rd Psalm, the mention of the shepherd's staff. Yes, the shepherd's staff is to help guide the sheep, but it is also a weapon, ready to be used to attack the wolf, to attack the thief. And so a shepherding elder is one who protects. And then the third responsibility of shepherding is to show. Look, it says being examples. The way that shepherds lead their sheep is they walk where the sheep are supposed to go. And the sheep watch and follow the example of the shepherd. So as the shepherd goes this way, the sheep listen for his voice and follow. You see, that is the leadership of a shepherd, is to be one who shows where to go by being already going there. That is to be an example of what they are to be. Now, Peter doesn't just leave us with a job description, he also stresses the motivation. Shepherds do not shepherd for prestige. We're not trying to fill out a resume. What shepherds do when they shepherd is act out love. Shepherding is an act of love. Who are we showing love for when a shepherd is shepherding? Peter says there are two audiences that you should be just flowing your love into as a shepherd. The first is you do this out of love for God. Look again at that second verse. Shepherd the flock of God as God would have you. As God would have you. What is your determination? What is your criteria for whether you are shepherding well? Is God delighted with it? As God would have you. It's not the elder's flock. We are only shepherding the flock of God. And so once again, as we saw last week, the strength of the sheep is the nearness to the shepherd. The same is true here. The strength of the elders is their nearness to the shepherd. The second motivation of love for the shepherd is for the flock. Let's listen again to verse 3. Not domineering over those in your charge, but being examples to the flock. In verse 2, not under compulsion, but willingly. Not for shameful gain, but eagerly. Repeatedly, Peter says, you do not do this for self-gain. Elders lead to serve, not to gain, but to give. Again, the fatherly heart. There is no relationship that has taught me more about this role than my role of being a dad. Because if you boil it all down, dads want to give everything they've got to make it better for their kids. And so an elder is like a dad. He is not there trying to get all the attention, all of the energy. He is trying to make it better for their kids. So at this time, As you know, next week we're going to have our congregational meeting where we're going to elect our first group of elders. And I think it is appropriate as you get ready to come into that meeting where you will elect your elders to know what your elders have been doing to prepare for this office. 2 years ago, I just spent time kind of praying and watching, looking for kind of that first group of people who might help me with leadership. And these 4 people kind of kept rising up and showing characteristics that encouraged me. And so we started meeting once a month, and then it moved to twice a month over the last 2 years. And we devoted ourselves to really going into these 3 responsibilities. We started with the responsibility of protecting. So we read a book by Sinclair Ferguson called The Whole Christ. And the purpose of this book is so that your elders know exactly what is the gospel. They know exactly what the gospel sounds like and what the fruit of the gospel is. So that they are aware if the gospel is no longer being preached, either because we are becoming a legalistic church or because we are becoming an antinomian, anti-law church, that the gospel is actually different than both of those. And so the charge that I put in front of these 4 men is your job is to know the gospel and to protect this pulpit so that this flock always hears the gospel. That is their very first job. After we went through the role of protecting, then we invested ourselves in the responsibility of showing, of being examples. And we went through this book called Emotionally Healthy Discipleship. And I charged these men that being an elder, being a leader of the church, is not being a brain on a stick. It's not about how much you know. It's not about your ability to parse doctrine and all that sort of stuff. That has a role, but what is most important is that you're like Abraham's, who know God. And other people can walk alongside you and say, I think they know God, and I want to follow their example. And so emotionally healthy discipleship was a very deep self-examining study where we had to share our weaknesses, our vulnerabilities, our failures, and our constant trust in the goodness of God's grace to make something out of us as much as we've messed ourselves up. And so it was a very formative time of trust building and of grasping the whole responsibility of being somebody who can point to Christ, not just by knowing a Bible verse, but by showing what it means to really live in and live out the message that Jesus Christ died for sinners and he is making me new. Then, after we covered those 2 books, believe me, they didn't quit. We went on and finally looked at that final responsibility of leading. And we looked at this book called Elders by P.J. Smith. And this book really spent a great amount of time talking about all of the scriptural commands of elders, the responsibility of shepherding, and the way that we help our flock, help one another walk in greater Christ-likeness. And so after these 2 years, I want to give you my report on these 4 men. They are not perfect. They are not 100% perfect elders. They fall well short of the Good Shepherd, just like your pastor does. But after watching them for 2 years, I can say they are living near the shepherd, and they love you. It is your opportunity next week to share whether you affirm that about these 4 men, as you'll be asked to elect them. So elders do their part by being shepherds. The second part we have to look at, members do their part by being shepherded. So I ran across this as a suggested Christmas present for myself, this coffee cup. Be the reason your church elders gather to pray more. You see, there's a two-way street here. Elders need to pray for the sheep, and so maybe you can make your elders even better by being the occasion for their prayers. I am actually wanting to argue that this is not the way I want you to support your elders. I want you to trust that they will pray for you enough without giving them multiple causes. I want you to look at verse 5 that Peter writes. Likewise, you who are younger, be subject to the elders. That command is just as hard as all of the commands given to the elders. Because being subject is not something we naturally do. We enjoy our independence. We enjoy our individualism. We enjoy having a quick and easy exit from anything that we don't want to be entangled with. Subjection is hard. It basically means choosing not our own way. It means being willing to follow, being willing to trust, being willing to heed. It really requires us to know ourselves as sheep and answer the question, do I need a shepherd? There was a day when Peter thought, I don't need a shepherd. And before that day was over, he denied his Lord 3 times. Do we recognize, do we remember that we are sheep? If we remember our truth that we are sheep, then we need to look at how Peter lays out this argument. Go back to chapter 2, verse 25. For you were straying like sheep, but have now returned to the shepherd and overseer of your souls. Peter is saying that ultimately we are shepherded and overseen by Jesus himself. We depend upon Christ's shepherding to be led and protected. We were going astray, but he has brought us back, and now we live under his protection. But it begs the question, how do we receive Christ's shepherding today? That's where Peter then says in verse 5 too, shepherd the flock of God that is among you, exercising oversight. You see, Peter says that the same things that Christ is doing as your shepherd and overseer are the things that are happening through your elders who are shepherding and overseeing you. They're the exact same words. The connection here is obvious. Elders are shepherding and overseeing. We are receiving Christ's shepherding through the elders that he gives us. There may be occasions where this happens, but this is not normative. In a healthy church, Christ's shepherding and overseeing of you is not happening apart from the oversight and shepherding of the elders. It's happening through the oversight and shepherding of the elders. Good elders, then, are a sign of Christ's love upon his church. And we give glory to God when we are given good elders. Now, elders' responsibility to lead well, Peter couples that with the flock's responsibility to follow well. That's what verse 5 is dealing with. And I want us to go back and look at, from a completely different angle, Jesus' parable of the 99 and the lost one. We love this story because we are told that the shepherd, who is Jesus, leaves the flock of the 99 and goes after the one who has been lost and been strayed. And we're like, wow, what a great shepherd who has gone after us. And yes, the good shepherd has gone after us. But do you want to know why that parable is so weird to the original listeners? Do you want to know why it is so strange to hear the story of a shepherd leaving the 99 to go after the one? Well, think about it. The shepherd protects the flock. The 99 are being left without a shepherd for the sake of caring and reaching and restoring the one. Now, that's great for Jesus. But what I want you to think about as part of the flock is when one of us goes astray, you leave the rest of the flock without shepherds. And the shepherds God has given us can't be in two places at one time. You see, what we need to pay careful attention to as part of the flock is that we protect the flock by making the shepherd's care for us easy. Right? If the situation in our life, if we deliberately go astray, if we deliberately go into unrepentant sin, your shepherds will go after you. And they will do all that it takes to restore you. But recognize that there will be a cost to the whole flock when you stray. And so seek so well as you can to protect the flock by making the shepherd's care for you easy. There are questions that we need to be ready to answer to make shepherding care for us easy. Beloved, your elders are committing to lead. Do you commit to be led? Your elders are committing to show you the way. Do you commit to learning from them? They are committing to protect you. Do you commit to heed their warnings? You see, beloved, shepherds are better shepherds when the sheep are willingly shepherded. And so I encourage you all, if you have not begun already, to begin praying for your elders. Praying for their strength, praying for their wisdom, praying for their discernment, praying that they are being brought closer and closer to their shepherd. Now, the third part, and this catches all of us, everyone does their part by practicing humility. Everyone does their part by practicing humility. Peter ends his discussion at the end of verse 5 by saying, "Clothe yourselves, all of you, with humility toward one another." Peter ends with a mutual call to humility. And this is because Peter also knows, even after he was restored and pledged 3 times to loving the sheep and feeding the sheep, to loving Jesus, if you read the book of Acts and you read the book of Galatians, this man still had some blunders ahead of him. This man still made some miscalculations. In the book of Galatians, he acted against the gospel. And yet, he still is here in this letter being a shepherd. So I want you to know the reason that we have to practice humility is because we will all fall short. I do. Your elders will. Only one shepherd is perfect, and it's not us. It's not us. And so if this is going to be a healthy church, we all have the part to play that we need one another's prayers and patience and forgiveness. You see, the elders that Peter is calling for here are elders who choose humility toward the flock. And likewise, the flock chooses humility towards the elders. And if that is the spirit, which I believe exists in Renew today, if that is the spirit that we all work to maintain, Peter has great encouragement for this church. He says at the very end of verse 5, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. What is that telling us? God will provide us all the grace that we need as we practice humility towards one another. Now, that last part of verse 5 is more than just a good proverb, more than just good counsel. It is also the gospel in proverb form. And that is the most important reason for why we must practice humility. The church is designed to display the gospel. So I want to take a moment to just pull back and to imagine or think through how the world thinks. What is the kind of reduced way that the world looks at themselves, that the individuals of the world think? And if I were to boil it down to kind of a 4-word phrase, the way that we think in the world is your life for me. Your life for me. We are designed to go out into this world and live in a dog-eat-dog world, and so we put ourselves first. We take care of our own interests first. We promote our own tribe first. We love those who love us first. We, when we live in the world, live under the ethos, your life for me. And so when we see leaders in the world, they take advantage. They use their people under them for profit. They dominate. They domineer. And when you are in positions of following in the world, when it's your life for me, you guard your heart. You trust little. And you live as much as possible for self. This is the way the world works. Your life for me. But we come here to live under a completely different ethos. We live under the gospel. We make the gospel real. We live it out. And the gospel's message is also 4 words. The gospel is my life for you. We live the gospel here, which is my life for you. Listen, this is how Paul describes it in Philippians 2. Have this mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men, and being found in human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Therefore, God has highly exalted him and bestowed on him the name that is above every name. Beloved, the gospel is what governs the church. We live under the example and under the ministry and under the finished work of Jesus Christ. How did he lead? Jesus led by laying down his life for the sheep. How did he serve? Jesus submitted himself to the cross to die for us. Jesus has made us his people, has made us his flock, because he practiced humility to his dying breath to make us his own. Beloved, do you know this Jesus who has died for you, who has left heaven and endured all the ridicules and mockeries and pain of death upon a cross so that you might be saved, that you might be redeemed, that you might live in his flock? If any of you do not recognize Jesus has died for you. I appeal to you. Put your faith in him. Cry out as that stray sheep. Call upon the name of the Lord, and you will be saved. But Jesus did this and has saved us and has made us this people so that we would also have this mind among ourselves. What does it mean to have this mind among ourselves? To be a body, a group of people who lives my life for you. It means that when we are elders, we lead to serve. And when we are members, we submit to serve. Both, everyone, practices humility by laying down their lives for the other. And when we lay down our lives for one another, we show a watching world. He lives here. You see, at the end of the day, this whole talk about how a church is structured, about church government and church offices, it hasn't left the core purpose of why we are here, to live in and live out the good news of Jesus. We practice leadership that is humble. We practice membership that is humble, that lays its life down for the other so that the world who is watching would see the Lord is here. The gospel is alive here. As I step back, my assessment, the Good Shepherd has given us a good church. The Good Shepherd has given us a good church. But as we move into this next step, we must all be committed to doing our part. And if we do our part together, we will shine the gospel into a world that desperately needs it. Amen?